Well, there's a lot of debate about the standardized testing. Joining us today is Ken Zarifis with Education Austin. That's a teachers union. He's opposed to the high-stakes testing. We should mention that an advocate for the test was unavailable this morning, so we are exploring one side of the argument. Thanks for sticking around this morning.
You bet, Brian.
Let's start with what's the case against the STAAR test?
Well, I think the case against any high-stakes test is it doesn't allow enough space for teaching and learning. The thought that you just take a test over a couple hours and that's all that it impacts the school year is really naive. You're preparing for the test. You look at possible closures, kids not going to ninth grade, not graduating. So it's extraordinarily risky and a high stakes. So schools are going to prepare for that in a way that takes up a lot of teaching and learning time.
The hope is to get students ready for college or ready for the workforce. How do Texas students fare as far as around the nation competition-wise?
Well, as far as their access and their readiness, we're seeing that their readiness is no better than anywhere else. We're seeing that kids, if there's any growth, we're seeing that kids can take a Texas state prepared test better, but it doesn't translate necessarily into college readiness and getting into college. College and career readiness is thrown around quite a bit lately in education circles. But what does it really mean? I don't think anybody understands what that really means.
Do you feel like the STAAR test was designed fairly?
I think people were well intended perhaps when creating the STAAR test. Once again, I think it's how the test is used and bringing educators into the discussion about what's important in the classroom. That's one of the factors that we really believe has been moved out. The experts, the teachers, aren't part of the equation nearly as much as we'd like to see.
Sure. And as far as the subject matter, you've got these textbooks. Each district uses their own set of textbooks, and then you have the STAAR test that uses maybe a different vernacular or phrases questions a different way. Is there a disconnect there?
Oh, surely there's a disconnect, because you have someone write, say in language arts, you have someone writing a question around inference, and they're going to write it to their understanding. They may vet it through a couple of people in the process, but that doesn't mean it necessarily translates to the student's understanding of it. I mean, there is a disconnect. How you answer a question in language arts, which I taught for 12 years on a multiple choice test, is different than the way you may articulate it in a long answer or an essay answer, which tells me more about what the student understands.
And we're also seeing a lot more vocational academies popping up in different high schools. Does a standardized test lose focus on the vocational opportunities? Well,
I think that all of our kids need to be prepared and have a basic understanding of all their core areas. What I'd like to see is that we're seeing that vocational education, whereas in the past it was in the high schools when I went to school, it's kind of being pushed up to the community college level. We'd like to see better relationships between public education and community colleges to where kids can have opportunities, if they choose to do so, into a vocation. We believe that's just as honorable direction as any type of college path or any type of professional path.
So if a standardized test at the end of the year is weighted too heavily, what's the alternative solution?
Well, if we look at the end of course exam and how we're weighting that as a 15%, we're seeing no consistency from district to district. It's an outrageous notion that one test should carry so much weight. It discounts what the teacher and the students have done in the classroom. We need to move away from the emphasis of the test and use it strictly as a diagnostic tool, not as a measure of getting out of high school or getting out of middle school to go to ninth grade. We talk, there's a lot of grandiose talk from the legislature and from policymakers about if you can't pass this test, you're not going to get to graduate. But we see that most kids go on to ninth grade, that a lot of kids do advance. We really need to get back to teaching and learning and not just testing.
And STAAR tests under a 5-year contract in its first year. I know you'd like to see some changes
immediately.
Thanks for joining us this morning, Ken.
You're welcome.
Natalie is back.